Hi, everyone. Welcome to Season 2 of Rez Dog Walkers podcast. I'm your host, Dallas Smith, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey. This season, we're diving into the benefits of First Nations, resource developers, and governments working together here in British Columbia and across Canada. When First Nations communities are healthy and thriving, the real opportunities to grow and succeed, everyone benefits. I'd like to welcome my good friend Larry Johnson for joining us today. He's the president of Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods, an avid fisherman, and all-around good guy. Am I missing something, Larry? Thanks for coming.
Well, I'm almost ready for Christmas, if that counts for anything.
That's always good. Christmas has taken a couple different stages for me over the years. Usually I used to work right up to the last minute. This is what I'm doing this year, but with the kids going crazy and Christmas concerts and all that, it's a lot of helijet back and forth to make sure I'm home on the island where I need to be. But where are you? You're still in Port Alberni?
Yeah, I live in Port Alberni. I've been there since 2019 now, and bought a house again once the market kind of settled a little bit there, and found a nice little home, and me and my sweetheart live together.
Nice. Good for you. Just for our guests, I mean, you and I have become such good friends over the years. I kind of take for granted that everybody sort of knows my friends as I bring them onto the podcast. But why don't you just give us a little, little bit of your background?
Yeah, Uklama Anitsachist, Histakshitla Huet. Good morning, everyone. I just introduced myself and what little I know of my own language, and it's Anitsachist is the name that I carry from my uncle, who was a chief of the Tokwat Nation, and it means keeper of the sea. So I was born and raised in Bamfield. Had a nice career where I ended up leaving fishing only to talk about it at a table for many years, and so I got into chief and council back in 1995, and have made it my career to look after the future and try to make things better for our people.
That's awesome. I mean, we're seeing more and more of that integration that you and I were talking about earlier this morning of, we have fisher people who've done certain things in the field, but now more and more people are leading into the management side of things. Maybe just give us a little bit of background on Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods. I know it used to be St. Jean's, and then you guys purchased it.
Yeah, Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods, it started out back in 2003, Dallas, when all our Nuu-chah-nulth nations were at the treaty table, and a treaty-related measures came across and to involve the 14 Nuu-chah-nulth nations in shellfish aquaculture. And so we formed a Nuu-chah-nulth Shellfish Development Corporation back in those days, and the idea was to bring the treaty-related measure, and I think it was about $3 million, and to bring 14 nations to build capacity in shellfish aquaculture. And so we embarked on that, and we found really quickly that not everyone is at the same level in terms of capacity. And so it was really challenging at first to broach the subject and find out and create, files for all 14 nations as to whereabouts they want to be in 5-10 years. And so, long story short is, 3 years kind of came and went really quickly, and we found we were unable to utilize the funding, what it was intended for. And so we ended up negotiating with the federal government to keep the funds and keep it as capacity building funds, so that the nations would continue on the journey of building capacity in shellfish aquaculture, because it's really a cumbersome process, as we found out. So back in those days, like I said, we ended up trying to keep the funds for training, and so 2003, 4, 5, 6 was the treaty-related measure. Around 2007 and 2008, the Pacific Integrated Commercial Fisheries Initiative came about, known as PICFI. And it was supposed to only come around for 5 years, and the intention was to create aggregates of First Nations working together, and based on business model, look for access to be transferred from industry over to First Nation groups. And so our group was one of the first out of the gate, and because we were already together, we had a governance structure already, and So it wasn't too hard for us to broaden the name to Nuu-chah-nulth Seafood instead of shellfish. And so we embarked on that. And long story short is we we did a really good job on our business planning model, and our nations bought into a retained earnings strategy, and for 5 years. And because the life of the program was supposed to be only 5 years, we fought really hard and lobbied governments to continue the program, because we could see that even though there was 25 CFEs started in British Columbia, that 5 years would not ever be enough to get the access it would take to reach scale for these companies to become self-sufficient. And so we lobbied really hard for a number of years to help the program be more deliverable and more First Nation friendly, per se, as a notion that the federal government can create a program that's going to work for everybody, and that was the idea. But we quickly showed that individual nations in different areas have different wants and needs, just like the climate has changed a lot of our landscapes. So we went along with the 5-year strategy of retained earnings, and about year 3 we started to look at what can we reinvest in. We always knew we needed to keep buying more access, but the goal was to work towards a vertically integrated seafood business. And the other part of the goal was so that we could tell our story, tell why we're connected to our lands, and our story of resilience, and our story of self-determination, our story about trying to build economy so we could bring our people back home. So in 2015, towards the end of 2015, I think it was at the end of November, we signed a deal to buy St. Jean's, and it was a really big moment for us.
Huge market, huge presence, right? Huge
brand. And so it was probably one of the legacy pieces of work I'd like to say in my career that I'm really proud of. It taught us a lot of lessons. It taught us the lessons about big business, when you want to, and it was big business for us, to buy a several $million company, and for us to convince 5 First Nation governments that, we knew what we were doing, and that we have a good business model, and that in order to get to the end goal, we had to work really hard with our heads down and persevere. And I say persevere because it's really hard to keep secrets. Non-disclosure agreements are really necessary when you start talking about
Democracy and
finance.
Telegraph doesn't acknowledge NDAs sometimes.
That's right. So again, like I say, I think it was one of the greatest pieces of work that taught me a lot about business and how business moves at business speed compared to, I worked in my government, our First Nation government, and chief and council for 14 years. And in that job, we're trying to bring things back to us, whereas in the business world, it's much different. It moves fast. You need to make decisions, sound decisions quickly. And so probably one of our greatest successes is that we've kept ourselves grounded with our Nuu-chah-nulth principles, the sacred principles. Hishuch-tzawach, everything is one, everything is connected and interconnected. Isach, which a lot of people think just means respect, but it's much more than that. It's how you carry yourself. It's if you do something over here, it's going to have an impact over here. So it's really understanding how the respect level works when you're interconnecting everything within your ecosystem. And then the final principle is u'athach, to take care of, and to take care of for 7 generations. So for me, when you live by these principles, that's what it means to me to be a Huu-ay First Nations, to be a Nuu-chah-nulth person that's working to an end goal. And I learned probably 20, 30 years ago that if you use principles, it will have a desired outcome. So you always need to think like that, and that's what I've done with Nuu-chah-nulth Seafood. We knew that we needed to separate business and politics, And we knew that we needed to have professional people in the business
Mhm.
world that can interact with today's
That's so
society.
important. Yeah.
And so, we've been able to do that. And, we had success in purchasing St. Jean's. Um, our goal was to pay it off as quick as we could. And I think we did it in about 3 years.
Wow.
We were trying to create, more certainty for us by the next part would be the land and the buildings, and also making sure that the business is being taken care of. So make sure that it's still progressing, that we wanted to grow the business, and we've been successful at that. And so, I'm sitting here, thinking in December at the end of the year, where we're looking at what's the new beginning in the new year, what's our new strategy, how are we going to get to that next level. And so, we look at those kinds of things, and that's what I like about a modern day treaty. It makes us think differently. It makes us think in a fashion where we're strategic planning now, and the plan will last for 8, 10, 20, 30 years. And it doesn't matter who's in government, because we'll follow that strategic plan, that framework, economic framework, which is gonna, if we could stick to the plan, and I mentioned it earlier when we're buying St. Jean's, sticking to the plan, keeping your head down and focusing on the end goal is how you'll achieve it. So yeah, that's where we're hoping is to get to the next heights, to get closer to vertical integration, to get more access so that our people are being actively employed, and as we're building economies at home, we're building homes and drawing people back home, not only for those economies, but back to our way of life, back to our worldview, where everything is connected, where there's respect for everything, where we're looking after it for 7 generations.
I think, it's kind of nice to hear that you're able to do something new, but to do it under a foundation of your own values that are inherent in your rights and title and your way of being and what makes you who way it. I've been doing this tour of the Nuu-chah-nulth, maybe because most of the aquaculture leaders aren't talking to me right now, but we'll get into that in a little later in this episode. But, I had John Jack on, and, John Jack and I have sort of grown up politically together,
Mhm.
but to see the leadership of people like yourself and Angela Wesley and Robert Dennis and that next generation coming right up behind them, like you said, implementing the same plan that was developed by the community. That must be so gratifying to actually see it. Those of us who are involved in this, we get head down and we do what we're doing, but to be able to step back and see that it's becoming generational now, that must be a really good feeling for you.
Yeah, it is really a good feeling, and I talk about the principles and live by those principles, but it's an everyday journey, Dallas, to understand how everything is connected, how this world and society works today, and how we're working to integrate it, how we're working to pull the people together so that we can collaborate and create economic reconciliation. There's a word
I
for you.
love that word, economic reconciliation. It's funny because I get caught using it almost as a not the way to portray reconciliation, but
Yeah,
if you don't have the economics, you can't do the rest.
that's right.
Our good friend Ashekamis in Howsit, he's doing some wonderful things on the social side, but he has to use economic reconciliation to be able to achieve that. And it's interesting in this day now, between Fairy Creek and salmon aquaculture and all these issues, there's so many things that people are trying to drive wedges between us when we need the ability to be able to paint the big picture for the general public. I'm sure you understand this just as well as I do, but that rural-urban divide is really a bit of a challenge when it comes to the sustainable development of natural resources, because we need to start somewhere. That vertical integration has to start somewhere, and
Yeah.
that's by getting involved in developing things and opportunities. But I know, it is a controversial issue. Salmon aquaculture is kind of what brought you and I together a lot. You developed something called the Indigenous Partners Network,
Yeah.
where we talk about aquaculture across Canada as a whole, from shellfish to seaweed to finfish, all those various things. But unfortunately, in British Columbia, we really get pigeonholed on this whole Atlantics thing right now.
Yeah.
But how are you guys integrating some of those opportunities into the vertical integration and vision of Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods?
Well, Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods, A number of years ago, we had a lady named Jennifer Woodland work for me. She was my CEO.
Both of ours, yeah.
And we were looking at diversification. We knew we had shellfish aquaculture on the go at various stages within the 5 nations. And so we started doing outreach, started just meeting with the 5 shareholding nations. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? Those kinds of things, and try to find a way so that we could complement and work with them, become their experts in fisheries management, as opposed to trying to create 5 fisheries departments within the nations. And so we wanted to be that group for them. And so we knew that shellfish aquaculture was challenging for the nations. Some did very well, and some were still at the starting gate. And there's no criticism to anyone. It's a really complicated process, and let alone trying to, create economic certainty within a nation, and create that plan of how you're going to go forward. And most nations have 4 years. And if you don't get it done within those 4 years, the chances are the next group is going to come in and either try to make you a figment of the imagination or just erase. And so there's no real good continuity there. Where were we going with that question again? I'm sorry.
Just the integration of, aquaculture
Oh,
as a division in Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods.
So anyway, we ended up going to, I think we had 5 sites we visited, of dormant sites that were inactive. And so we looked at their management plans to see what was listed on it, found out where they wanted to be in 5, 10 years, what were they willing to try. And so we looked for a grant from NSERC. We got an NSERC grant. We partnered with CERMAC because we were in discussions with CERMAC anyway. And we partnered on a kelp project. North Island College, CERMAC, Nuu-chah-nulth Seafood, and NSERC grant. We got a test pilot where we took 5 sites and we put seeded kelp lines from the top to the bottom, and we started measuring things like temperature and salinity and watched the growth and monitored it. And over the first year, we found that 2 of the 5 sites were excellent for growing kelp. And so we started there, and we introduced Cascadia seaweed to the nation so that they could create their own agreement, because it is between a nation and the industry. What was in it for Nuu-chah-nulth Seafood? We were after a model. We're after a model that could be sustainable, that puts back into our environment what's been missing, creates an economic spin-off so that there's jobs. And so we really wanted to try to work in kelp. And so 2 of our nations did it. My nation pulled back out of it because we are heavily investing in oysters. And so Nuu-chah-nulth stayed within it, and they wanted to partner because they wanted to go after a bigger amount of hectares, because we used the tenures that were already had management plans in it and just tried to amend them, because it was much faster to amend a management plan as opposed to starting from scratch. And so we got kelp going for Nuu-chah-nulth. They wanted to expand, so the following year they went through an application process, which ended up being an overlap with another nation. Hence, an agreement came forth. Now those 2 nations are working together. So to me, it's a really good model in terms of when you have 2 nations with overlapping interests. A really good solution is for them to work together and create an economy out of it, and jobs that will be shared between the 2 nations. So that was the kelp project with Nuu-chah-nulth. I've since lined myself up, like you mentioned earlier, and worked with PICFI, and we started an Indigenous Partnership network, and tried to line up a number of First Nations. I believe we had over 20 nations that signed up for it. But because this transition is taking so much of the limelight right now, we're unable to get working on this network.
I feel so bad because you and Jennifer came to me and like, hey, this is what I want to do. And we got support from Kaya, and we got some funds to start bringing people together. And I was fully on board, and then I think 2 weeks later, I was like, "Sorry, I gotta go fight the fish farm transition issue."
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you're able to sort of keep the water warm while we're still,
Yeah.
trying to find ways to work together.
Anyway, calmer heads prevailed. I talked to Pickfey and said, well, look, until this political nightmare, and I'm going to call it a nightmare because it is, gets resolved, I think we need to be in holding pattern because these nations have probably the utmost important job is to try to protect what they already have, and that's working for their people. And so, we want to watch for that. And so we sit on the sidelines with the Indigenous Partnership Network. But it did gather a lot of momentum. It showed that First Nations are interested in working together. It shows that we are interested in networking for the sole purpose of building economics, for the sole purpose of sharing knowledge on business planning and stuff, so that we don't all have to invent the wheel or hire consultants to help us get business plans going. So yeah, it's a really unique movement that's waiting in the sidelines, and I can't wait to get it started again, pick back up, and some of the momentum from those nations that are already working together on this, fighting their cause. And then, once we get past this difficult part, I think that economic reconciliation might be a slingshot event coming here, because if we all start working together, I think it'll be a lot easier for First Nations to come together, work with local governments, and then go to the federal government with a plan.
With a plan,
Yeah.
Well, and that's, the cool thing of watching, Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods develop in the leadership role that, Nuu-chah-nulth played in court cases and various, other outside pressure points to help move your agenda forward. It's been nice to watch because commercial fishing sustained our people for so long. The sustainability side of it, obviously, if we could revisit it, things might have been a little bit different. I remember my great uncle, my dad's oldest brother, he said, your grandfather used to fish 7 days a week in the summer. When I took over, I fished 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And when my son took over, he fished 3 days a week. And now my grandson fishes 3 days a year. So we need to look at other models of building the jobs and opportunities that are there. I think one of the things that I love is that vertical integration side, because while we used to have so many boat owners and skippers who provided employment for 6 to 8 people, none of it was community driven. It was all, entrepreneurial and their own efforts. And as it started to die off, I'm glad nations have found a way to work together through CFEs and different PICB initiatives and things to try to bring a more communal aspect to it. I think of the lands and resources that get developed. They're not, the chiefs and councils, they're the peoples. And so we need to make sure that any development of those goes back into an investment that's going to help the people. And over the years, the fishing industry did, because it kept people employed. As people started losing jobs and the social issues started to get up. I think of the 70s and 80s of just how tough it was in a lot of our communities, because fishing was already starting to die off. The wealth wasn't as generated as with as much continuity as it was in the 50s and 60s and maybe even the early 70s. But it's kind of neat to have this front row sideline seat to watch all these things develop. And I'll get into the activist side a little bit later, but for all of us, we're just doing ocean planning and business planning. The fact that salmon aquaculture or shellfish aquaculture or seaweed aquaculture is one minute part of it, but it's overall planning picture that we're trying to achieve. And so to watch the Nuu-chah-nulth nations do as well as you have, it's really helped us sort of get our shit together a little bit and saying, okay, we need to work together. Even though we disagree on some issues, we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And so we need to find those common denominators. But I like what you guys do around the keeping the politics out of it. If we're going to run successful corporations, they need to be run by people who have the capacity to do them with oversight and principles, as we talked about.
Yeah.
But, what's some of the things that you hope to see continue to get picked up? We talked about, young guys like John Jack who sort of stepped in and started to fill roles, but you also have people working in these industries and all that. Have you seen a shift there where the next generation of a household's gone into, maybe the fish plant or the smoking plant or something like that?
Well, that's just it. That's the challenge. I'm not seeing it. It's hard for us to get involved and in a meaningful way. The commercial fishing industry is going to change dramatically over the next while with the SRKW, with TMX, LNG, all these different initiatives, climate change. I mean, the ocean is going to be a lot busier place than it is right now, and that's one of the things that I don't think our general public really knows what's going on out there. Like we all sit in buildings and in Zoom meetings, etc. But if you ever look on an AIS system at what's traveling around every second of the day, there's a lot of traffic. The aspirations of Canada is to ramp it up even more. That worries the hell out of me, when we're trying to build economies that are slow moving in aquaculture. We're debating, we're trying to protect a lifestyle that we had living off of the ocean. Our treaty nations are trying to build economies back at home, and we have to do it and be involved at the table because the world is moving fast, really fast. And I always say, it wasn't that long ago, Dallas, that if something happened at 1 minute after 5 on Friday afternoon, you never heard about it until the paper on Monday. It wasn't that long ago, man. We pushed the button on the computer for the first time. So here we are now in a really fast world, and I don't know that we're ready for it. I don't know that we're ready for the change. I see a lot of people that are in my age bracket not letting go. They're worried because the economics aren't there anymore. We're having to work longer. So we've had longer mortgages and things like that. Today's society has put what my dad worked his whole life for. You can get up front now and work the rest of your life for that. So the shift is real, and it's changed. I think we really need to embrace technology. I think we really need to embrace where the next generations are going to bring and use technology. Because right now, the skinny around the table is the next generation's lazy. All they're doing is staring at their phone all day. Well, the reality is they know way more through that little device than we ever have in our lifetimes. And so we need to be able to embrace that change, have trust in them. Like, I know when I got involved in politics, I'm sure there was some people that thought, oh, good, we got somebody who's digging in. But, at that same time, we're in this time of change. The world isn't letting go. So it's hard to watch climate change. It's hard to watch my son, who's 27 years old, fight for his heavy-duty machinery job when, somebody that's, I'm 66 now, and there's guys that are 66, 70 years old still out there, and they're not letting go, right? And so until we can make that shift and have some faith and trust in that next generation taking that torch and making this world theirs. I mean, we all have to kind of take ownership of it. And I mean, like you and I, we get up early every day, we go to work, we're committed to that process. I know myself, I don't understand where the next generation is going to go with all this stuff, because it's going so fast. And I just have a lot of hope for them, and I hope that we can trust them more, and use technology and education to our advantage, and partnerships, start working together more. Collaboration is really key, I think, going forward.
I think it is, and I share some of the same concerns as we're pretty vertically integrated at Nuu-chah-nulth and the nations that I work for. We bought a grizzly bear viewing lodge, we bought a forestry operation, we bought some things, and we didn't create the employment we thought we would. We thought we'd have people banging down the doors to come work for our companies, but they don't.
Yeah.
That's something that we're trying to. So we're still trying to put those values that we talked about earlier. Respect's really the biggest thing. Put those values in there. So when eventually they do get their chance to hold the wheel, our dear friend Robert Dennis, who, I'm going to be seeing on my next episode, always talks about, let's drive the bus. Let's make sure we're driving the bus.
Absolutely.
And get the people that we need on the bus in there. But, and take this for a little bit of a change now. You've been, I don't want to say a godsend, because then that declares my religious values and things like that. But, when you and I first started talking about the IPN and then the salmon farming stuff came up, and it's hard. It's hard because there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of anger. I see that, Isaiah and I had a press conference when we were out in Ottawa. I saw you out in Ottawa a couple weeks ago, and Isaiah and I had a press conference where we called out UBCIC to quit telling us what to do in our territories. And we ruffled some feathers, and that's, there's accountability there. We got up in the public and said something, but it turned into this tit for tat thing now where the Musqueam chiefs of my territories got up and called me out personally last week. And it's really tough because these are uncles, these are cousins, these are family members. And to try, just take something away and say this is about the business is hard because it has to be built on the values of respect, but it has to go both ways, I think. This whole role, and again, I've been, learning more about the Huu-ay-aht and some of the Nuu-chah-nulth nations, Manus nations, the role for hereditary leadership and elected leadership. Maybe just give me some of your thoughts on that. I know you guys try to do a little bit of both.
Yeah. Well, we have
Please
incorporated both into our treaty world. It started when we were building our own constitution. We went, had some people going door to door, having a cup of tea with the elders, sitting down, talking about what's important. And our hereditary system was really important because that's the original owners. That's our tie to our oral history. That's our tie to our way of life. So, incorporating it was really, really important. So how we managed it was that we created a hereditary council, and from that council, they elect a person to sit on the elected executive or the nation. So I like to say we have both worlds covered, whereby when we say we're open for business, that's both sides, both governments, the old governance structure and our new governance structure. And there's a slogan, see if I can get it right. Ancient mind, modern spirit. So that's our Constitution is a living example of that. And I think it's an honorable way to do it. It's a way that in my mind dots our I's and crosses our T's in today's world. And it's important that our hereditary leaders are involved. The principles in which we all live are center and what drives us to the end goal.
And that's almost staggered a little bit by community. Some communities have a lot more of it figured out. Some communities, it's a work in progress. It's been interesting working on this file because I've been working with Tlaloquit, and they work under their hereditary leadership. Has it similar where you guys have an integrated model, but you always are clear on where each of those nations stand on things. And that's something that we're trying to work out internally. I mean, because of, again, the romanticism around the wild salmon and the emotion that's involved in it, we're getting this Hatfield and McCoy's thing with our own people. And, we've always respected the rights of each community to make their decisions, regardless of what business, what culture, what field it is in. The people who live there should make the decisions for there. But while their opinion's important in my territory, they don't have any say in my territory. And so we're trying to bridge that gap of how do we have these conversations that, really one part of it's tough, but the rest sort of has to happen. And I sort of unfortunately learned to lead with my chin on issues like this. But, thanks to, tutelage from people like yourself and Robert of just kind of calm down a bit of it. Nobody means anything as deeply as it sort of sounds on social media. Sometimes I think social media is sort of a blessing because, like you said, it really helps information flow to our kids and our next generations. But it's also a little bit scary because everybody's tough on a keyboard. You don't have to look someone in the eye. You can say something a lot more drastic than you normally would. And so we're trying to figure out that balance of, okay, where does respectful engagement happen and what is just keyboard social media fodder? And I struggle with that more and more because of the salmon farming stuff. It's amazing how personal it gets. There's people literally harassing my daughter at school now over some of these issues, but people need to focus on the fact that whether you like salmon farming or not, there's over 600 jobs in First Nations communities that are dependent on it right
Yeah.
now. And if a transition plan has to happen, we have to understand where those jobs are going to go. What's going to feed these families and feed these communities? And so while it's important to make sure that we acknowledge the concerns that people have, there's still a real issue in front of us. And it's unfortunate that the federal government has continued to do this. They've kind of strung the discussion along. They sort of kicked the can down the road for a little while because they don't want to make a decision.
Yeah.
They understand the optics, they understand the economics, they understand the employment side of it, but they're getting harassed by the same social media people that we are on this issue. And so it's really been poorly managed by the federal government. But I'm sure you're not surprised that I'm saying DFO is having a hard time managing something. For a guy who's been doing it as long as you, have you seen some good things coming out of DFO? I know you got to say it with a grain of salt because you've been to court with them and you own a business that's dependent on
I would
that.
say that our approach to what comes out of DFO is to build on our successes and try to take what is going out and then feed back in our worldview. And it's a constant. That's a constant.
It is a constant, though, isn't it? You can't really let your guard down with
No.
any level of government on those kinds of issues.
No, and it's even more difficult nowadays with social media. And I want to just raise it for a second here is that, social media is really good when we want to get information out. A lot of people use it for different things, and that's where I have trouble with it. And the minute you start governing from social media is where we're in trouble. So I think you got to take it with a grain of salt. I like to use it for positive output and reaching people that you can't reach. So it's a good tool in that sense. So yeah, just got to be careful. Social media is very dangerous.
I had to turn my Facebook page off. When I ran in 2017, you had to have one because how everybody communicated. And I made the mistake of reading the comments a couple times, sitting there, and I'm just like, I'm going to check my Facebook page out. And I'm like, I got like 432 notifications. I'm like, oh my God. And so I went through that for about a week, and I finally had to talk to my campaign team, and I'm like, I understand we have to have it, but you guys run it.
Yeah.
But the problem when someone else was running my social media accounts for me is people knew it wasn't me because, I'm pretty straightforward, shoot from the hip, or wear my heart on my sleeve. And so when I'm sending out this generic bullshit about the Liberal Party and the election platform and all that, everybody's like, this isn't you. We can have this.
Yeah.
Rez Dog Walkers is part of an ongoing conversation that connects directly to the upcoming BC Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference, BC IROC, happening June 18th to 20th, 2025 in Nanaimo, BC. Since its inception, this conference has fostered countless successful partnerships that bring meaningful benefits to First Nations, resource developers, businesses, and all levels of government. BC IROC continues to lay the groundwork for future collaborations and growth across the resource sector. Visit www.bciroc.ca to learn more about the conference, its sessions, and how you can participate. Look forward to seeing you there. I want to go into something that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Fishing. Actual rod and reel fishing. That's what you do with some of your downtime, I notice. And I've been trying to start this controversy in the Nuu-chah-nulth world about who's going to catch me the biggest fish when I come out. My friends up in Tehadasat sort of said, we'll get you. I know Simon John's like, I'll get you on a fish. And then I was teasing Robert Dennis about it, and then I brought your name up, and he said, no, if you want to catch a fish out or go with Larry. Yeah. What do you like about getting out on the water and just chilling out a little bit?
Well, it's the place that, grounds me, I guess. It's not even the ground.
Yeah.
But it's,
centers you.
When I think about my name and I've been trying to live up to my name because my uncle gave me that name. And I better share the story is that I think I was about 30. So half a lifetime ago, my uncle wanted to bring a Thunderbird dance out of, it had been in a holding pattern for 30 years and he hadn't done it forever. And so he brought me in and wanted me to learn how to do it. So the first thing you do is you have to learn the song. Just to learn it forwards, backwards, understand it, the whole thing. And then you learn how to dance it. But the thing is there's no Thunderbirds around to watch. And so they set me up and they said, well, watch an eagle. Watch an eagle when he's flying. Watch an eagle when he's landed. Watch when he's interacting. And so, yeah, I did that dance for him. And after I did that dance, they gave me the name Nuu-chah-nulth. And he said, from now on, that's what you'll be known as. And as a matter of fact, he took it to the next level and brought me into the local DFO office in Port Alberni and told them that I was in charge of the sea now. And I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
that's a pretty heavy title. So at any rate, I've been working my way to fill those shoes, per se. And it's kind of an ironic story is that, I was running away from my small town fishing career because that's what small town boys do. And but little did I know that it actually was my calling. And when I got voted in as the chief and council, which I never ever thought I'd ever do in my entire life, I found that it was the place I needed to be. And so working for the future generations.
I've always heard that about you. Really sort of managed to find yourself where you need to be. Not necessarily where you want to be all the time, but where you need to be. I've always admired that.
A great chief told me one time, he says, take every opportunity you can and go with it. You don't know where it's going to bring you. And so I've done that. I've had a pretty good career so far, and knock on wood, I managed to, one of my prouder moments was to be appointed to the International Pacific Halibut Commission and for Team Canada. But that was good. But again, like what keeps me at the table is my passion for fishing, my passion for what my father did and what his father did, and the knowledge in which they passed down from generation to generation. So to keep that alive for me, I have to go in the ocean. I have to get in my boat and not know exactly where I'm going to go fishing, because it's a feeling inside that it steers you where you need to go.
Not GPS.
No, well, it's a handy unit. But my teachings were from my father, who talked about landmarks. And it was really cool for me to, when I first learned how to work a GPS and run a 30-foot boat, 20-foot boat with a 200 or 300 horsepower on it, and go and we did procurement analysis, where we would take my dad's theory and say, okay, we need to go 210 degrees until Cape Bill lines up with this island, with that river, and etc. And we're driving along, and I'm hearing him go to the right, go left, this, that. Okay, stop. We're here. And I'm looking, and I can see what he was looking at, right? And for them, it was really cool, because what would have taken 4, 5, 6 hours, we do it in an hour and half an hour. And so a couple of times we had to go past, a few times, until we lined it up just right, and then we stopped and, for me, push the button. I got it saved, right? But it was really neat to see how all of that did work. And, I'm just in awe with how knowledge was transferred down, and how the evolution of commercial fisheries happened from our knowledge. Like the long lining, like those circle hooks were derived from our traditional hook. And each time you catch the fish right there, not snagged, not on the tail, not anywhere else, but right there every time. So we had those technologies. We knew where those banks were. And so, yeah, it's the thing that centers me.
Nice.
And makes me feel peaceful. Yeah.
I don't have many regrets in my life. I think, regret's sort of a wasted emotion sometimes, I think. But I got to spend glorious summers with my uncles, from both sides of my family, fishing. And I wish I recorded more of it, because I would just sit in the wheelhouse and, on a 6-hour wheel shift, listen to my great uncle talk about the different people that came from different communities and different places where he got his first big set, and where he, got a whale caught up in his net, or where something horribly happened. And I just wish I recorded more of that. I'm glad that I have those memories, but to be able to pass some of those things on, I think, is part of that integration and instilling values into our next generation that we need, because they are very technologically advanced now. And I won't say their focus is different, but to be able to pass on information to the youth of nowadays, you have to do it differently. And so I wish we did have more teachings from some of the elders to be able to, put into some kind of social media for them to see a little bit.
Well, I've managed to use a little bit of it where I'm trying to teach my grandsons how to fish. And so what do? Filleting. They say, you do it too fast. I said, well, video it.
Ah,
So they video it in slow motion, then I can narrate behind.
there you go.
And so they found ways to make technology work for us, right? So yeah, no, I'm excited about those kinds of things where passing on that knowledge and using today's technology to make life easier for the next generations.
So what's next? You got Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods, the Gratitude brand's really taking off. I think that's been one of the great value-added opportunities that you guys have brought forward. I mean, St. Jean's was just such a big move, because the first thing you see when you get off the plane in Vancouver is St. Jean's. The last thing you see when you get on the plane in Campbell River is the little St. Jean's stand. Like, to be able to take that and make it indigenous and have that, providing opportunities back into the communities. I guess you don't just stop at where you're at right now. You need to be looking at the future.
No, we're trying to keep our real estate in Sobeys. We're in 400 stores now with Gratitude, and in order to stay there, we need a raw source supply. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to try my best to talk with nations about working together, because, with the transition plan currently has finfish on hold. All we can rely on right now is commercial fisheries, and it's hard to keep a brand in a marketplace if you have to depend on commercial fisheries. So, what's next? Collaboration. Find the nations that we can work with. Find the nations that want to tell their story similar to our story. And maybe there's a way we could work underneath an umbrella brand called Gratitude that tells a Nuu-chah-nulth story, or a Hausa story of Hashekbis, or whatever it happens to be. But find a way that we can collaborate and come together, working together as First Nations people, and hold our marketplace, because our story is important.
That's such a great point, because there's so many of us who are trying to tell our story, and we're sort of building the platform for it, but it's without a collective vision. I'm glad that we're taking the business side of this so seriously, because the reality is that fish processing is going to change, and it's going to continue to change. I think of how many canneries we used to have versus what we have now. There's your operation. There's, I think, one left in Steveston, one part-time, one in Prince Rupert. I know Browns Bay is going through the same challenges in my territories, of where, they had to bite the bullet and go into processing farm salmon, and that helped them on a path forward. It helped them bring continuity. It kept the work shifts going throughout the whole year. But now the transition plan has been reduced by 40%. The state of salmon aquaculture is reduced by 40% in British Columbia right now, and it's the processing plants that are feeling that. So I think it's going to take some really, clear, direct Indigenous leadership to help, bridge some of these gaps that are there, because we all don't need processing plants.
Yeah. No.
I wish I lived in a world where we all did. That's one of the reasons why shellfish fell apart for us, was because we all wanted our own.
Yeah.
And it was just too expensive. And so none of us were successful.
And that's what's going on right now. Current thing, 25 CFEs, they all want to do their own thing. They all want to have their own brand. They all want to tell their story. And that's a colonial thing, right? Where we're all trying to do our own thing. And reality is we know how the wolf pack works. We're stronger together. So we need to follow our relatives in the spirit world and the animal world, and start coming together.
I think the IPN is going to be a great platform for that, because, you got so much interest going. We had some of the people doing trout farming in Ontario, some of the First Nations doing trout farming. We had your guys during Arctic char in the north, and then, our good friend Chief Terry Paul decides, well, I'm going to buy all the lobster quota on the East Coast now and buy my own seafood processing plant. So I think there's some there's some examples out there that we can follow, and no one ever wants to cookie cutter it. No one wants to say this is how they did it, so we have to do it the exact same way. But I think in just what you were saying earlier between, there's certain parts of the Nuu-chah-nulth area that are doing things and telling that story. You got the Kitasoo who've been pioneering salmon farming, and they have some value-added brands. But I don't think that there's a lack of room in the marketplace for us. I've been to some of the seafood shows that you go to, and the biggest thing they tell us is we need more, and we need it more consistently. And the state of the world today is the wild fishery is just not giving us that right now. We just had another tremendous slide in some areas that are going to impact fish 4 years from now. And so I think we need to finally bridge the gap between what is a food security issue around seafood production, and then how do we still continue to protect and enhance wild salmon. I think that's maybe something you can help me clarify for our listeners a little bit. There's not one nation involved in salmon aquaculture who's doing it at the cost of wild salmon. No, I think that's a sad narrative that's been pinned on us, is they think that we're against wild salmon.
Yeah, even when I went to Norway, that was one of the things that I found is that, like, what is a country like Norway who's so advanced in terms of the technology and what they've done there, and the advancement is the cohesion and working together. That's what we're not doing here in Canada. So we as First Nations need to take the lead. We're so fragmented in this country, and this country's systems are siloed. And I always say it's really hard to be an urban Indian because, with our worldview of everything is interconnected, we get asked singular questions all the time, every day, all the time, to 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to respond, right? And so it's hard to go back and forth in those two worlds. Even for me as a fisherman, I'm unplugged because I don't live at home anymore. I don't know what the tide's doing right now. I don't know, but when I go home and I take a month off, it takes me about 4 or 5 days, and I don't have to look at the tide book anymore or anything. To me, that's what I mean by plugged into our territory. We're part of our territory, and so it's challenging for us to have our way of life. And I think the only way for us to do it is if we lead and if we all come together. Because when I look and I study Hishuk-Tsawak interconnectedness, we managed everything by the value of how are we related and how are we coexisting. So when you consider the fights between nations, we had arranged marriages to create those peace, and then that respect was there once that peace was, and it was there forever.
That's a good point because, we get caught up in the warring. We all, we're warrior state. The Hadas were warriors. The Pakwagok were warriors. The Celtic were warriors. If we warred that much, we'd all speak the same language. Sam Gensly would have won, right? Someone would have built a dynasty and been the Genghis Khan of the Pacific Northwest coast. But, wars happen when they had to, and different things set them off, obviously. But we have these beautiful languages and customs and intermarriages, like you're saying. I was talking to a couple of our chiefs who value the relationships that their grandfather had with your people because it brought us together in some issues. And I know you and my brother Tuma are quite close, and just helping people understand that there's a lot more of us talking about solutions than there are talking about the problems. I think that's something our youth need to see. We don't do a very good job of talking about the good things we do. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, is because everybody needs to understand a lot more of what goes back and forth to make a successful business opportunity. It's one thing to have a willing proponent. It's one thing to have a nation who's interested, but there's so much relationship building in between that has to happen. And when it happens right, beautiful things happen. When it doesn't happen right, it looks like, shellfish and some of the other things that we've tripped on because we weren't able to get the relationship in place to help us understand what are the shortcomings, what are the opportunities, where are we going to have to band together, where can we not divide and conquer, but where can we, fight different battle, the same battle in different rooms. And it's been interesting as sort of, I turned 50, so maybe I'm just having a little bit more reflecting time a little bit. But I've been doing this for 30 years now. And to see the change of these young leaders who are coming in with education, like, again, I think of young Chief Chris Roberts and Camel River, I think of John Jack, these guys who have degrees, but they're also culturally grounded. And they're fearless. they're fearless, and we need to find more ways to support these young emerging leaders like that. But like you said, we got these people who don't want to let go, and
Yeah.
I think I'm turning into one of those guys who doesn't want to let go, and that scares me a little bit. And so glad to spend some time with you and be able to just sort of help get that perspective back. You're always good at helping create perspective, and I appreciate it.
Well, one of the things that just occurred to me while we're talking is that, people ask, what makes you get up and go every day? And I go, well, my teachings. And it wasn't just listening to them, it was actually living them. Because actions are really what, like reconciliation. We need action, right? So I remember being a kid fishing with my dad, and we'd go into Ukiulit. And he'd go, okay, well, we're cleaning fish. So he says, bring this one up to your grandmother. So I'm running all the way up, bring it over to my grandmother, come all the way back down. That done, Dad. Okay, well, bring this one to your uncle. Well, I'm running back and forth, right? And meanwhile, I sit there and I give away fish all the time. My wife is like, Larry, we can't afford to do this. And I go, well, that's just our way, right? Our value system is to give. What can you give? And so, I come by it naturally when I think back on it and on my father. I remember one time, I think I was around 12 or something, December 15th, he went out fishing, caught 75 fish over 20 pounds. We went to every dock in Banfield, had me running up and down the docks to give fish away. So you wonder why, we're kind people, we're giving people. It's because it's rooted in us, and it was the actions that we did as kids that come back to us later on in life as teachings.
So I know this is never goodbye. It might be, starting of a wrap down of our little session today, but the Indigenous Partners Network, once we get through some of the silliness on the aquaculture transition, I look forward to standing beside you and some of the people that we brought together to further this discussion, because it's more real now. We have investments in this.
Yeah.
This isn't just something we're hoping to achieve. We're doing it.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can take our foot off the gas. I think it's so important to see some of these initiatives through so the next generation doesn't have to fight to keep it.
Yeah.
Their fight is going to be to keep moving it forward, as opposed to will we or should we not be. Maybe just some closing thoughts from you on just where First Nations are on the whole need to integrate our customs and values, but also prepare for the future. You've alluded to it a little bit with, the kids and the phones and technology and things like that. Is Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods, embracing technology as you go forward with processing and all the different things you're involved in?
Yes, we have been trying to embrace it each year. I look forward to trying to find from our CEO at St. Jean's, what do we need to help automate us more? Because it's hard to get people to come to work. And so that's what we're finding is we've been looking to automation, looking to where can we fill those gaps. And so automation, I think, technology, First Nation led, we have to lead. Otherwise, people are guessing at what's good for us. And there's nobody better than us to tell the world what we need. And we need to get rid of that shyness or whatever it is, that mystique cloak that we have that doesn't want us asking. We need to, instead of asking with our hand out, we need to go start leading boldly, going there forward, brushing that, creating that path so that the next generations can follow behind us.
Nice. Well, I hope we can see you at BCI Rock. I know that's coming up in June, where we bring together people to talk about the success stories and things that we've done. And I know I'm probably going to see you at Helijet and probably in Ottawa and all those things.
Yeah.
But if I don't get to see you before the holiday season, make sure you give your honey a squeeze for me, and you make sure you get out there and catch a halibut. And if you need to give some away, my kids love Nuu-chah-nulth halibuts.
Yeah. Well, I will definitely keep you on my list. Besides that, you're on the list to come out, buddy. I got to get you on the boat.
Looking forward to it, my friend. Thanks a lot for being here.
Yeah, no sweat.
Thank you so much to Larry Johnson for joining us today, and thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. A big thank you to our sponsors and partners for supporting the BC Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference. Your contributions make this important event possible. Thank you again for listening, and stay tuned for another episode of Rez Dog Walkers coming your way soon.
Oh, 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 oh.